Okay, let me actually start with a change that I described, I think, in the newsletter, and I definitely changed on the page. But I just want to make sure it's clear how we're running these sessions now, because it's going to be different. Uh, we're going to continue having them like we have them. But what I'm in the process of doing for the ACE program, just a second, I got the video. I just noticed I have a new camera and it kind of got activated. I didn't want this one. I want that one. Okay, better lighting. I still have to adjust it. There we go. Uh, we're going to still have these sessions, but what I'm in the process of doing for the Amplio Consultant Educators program is I'm building a library that's about the equivalent of, I don't know, 8 or 9 days of training. And to focus on that, I'm picking some topics that work well for the Amplio community practice, which is this, to do recordings of. So these are still interactive. I still want you to be talking to me and ask questions as we go, but we're not going to use the format of 20, 30 minutes to start and then discussion. We're just going to have what could be as much of a 40 to 50-minute presentation so I can get it in the library. So that's the new format. So don't suppress yourself. I still want interaction, but I think it's important that I build this. And this session I'm particularly excited about on systems thinking, and I'll tell you a little bit of the background on how a shift that came out of the ACE program will be taking place. I had, as part of that program, I was making a list of all the different things that I think you need to know to be a really top consultant, things I've used over the last 25 years of being a consultant in the, not originally in the Agile space, but pretty soon to it. And and the list was long. I was a little surprised by how long it was. And these were just mostly things that other people aren't doing. So that's even worse because I wasn't even talking about the basics of like what's in Scrum or Safe or Kanban or things of that nature. And I realized this is just too much. And then we got into a conversation about how people like to learn. And I think there's a certain amount of learning that everybody likes to do, but there's also a certain amount of solving problems that everybody likes to do. And when urgency rises, the desire to just learn for learning's sake goes down while the desire to solve your problems goes up. And I think one of the interesting things out of that is a shift in maybe some of the material and way I'm presenting it is wanting to talk about the problems being solved with anything I present, because it's actually more useful from a learning point of view. And I'll be candid, having done this, I'm redoing yesterday's A session and I kind of adjusted this one for that. It makes me think about the real value of this. I admit, I'm one of these guys, I just like to learn. I've been always doing that. Even in high school, I was reading books from MIT, kind of Pat Winston and some of the early AI pattern recognition people. And I just do. That's just how I am. And everybody has a certain amount of that. But just learning to learn, while it can be useful in the busy world we have today, is not as effective. So as I go through this today, I really would like y'all to be thinking, how can I use this to solve my problems? And yes, this is interesting. Let's learn the interest, but it's both. It's how does system thinking work as a mechanical thing or not a mechanical thing? Because there's a human aspect to it. I'll talk about that. But also, how do I use this to solve my problems? Or, I wonder if I could solve my problem with this or if it would help me. So please keep that in mind. Uh, and the thing is to put this into perspective. Why did I start with systems thinking? There's this thing we call Amplio foundations, or I call it Amplio foundations. And it's built on a lot of components. And you don't really need to know these to use Amplio. But if you're going to be a consultant who wants to lead instead of following, it's a good idea to know all of these. So there is a huge amount that's there. I've got systems thinking down here a little bit on the bottom, not because it's not of importance, but because it's kind of the foundation for all this. It's a way to look at the whole, and we'll get into that. First principle, so we can understand this thing that Ellie Goldratt calls inherent simplicity, where we can get to the root causes. And I know there's a lot of debate about if we can do that, but yes, we can, and I'll show you that. Value stream management is a way to see what's going on. And then Christopher Alexander's How to Decompose. All of these, plus one or two more, are topics I'm going to be doing over the next couple of months. Okay. I might throw in some real pragmatic stuff as well, things like minimum valuable increments or things like that. But the reality is, I already have recordings for a lot of those practical things. So I'll make a library for you in particular that says, here's what my live sessions are. But here are some recordings. Like I already have hours and hours on value stream management. So I'm not going to have a live session on that because I've already had live sessions on that. So I'll be building this with a combination of live sessions and recordings. And I think this is very important. And why systems thinking? And I realized that I don't know I've really given enough time to this. These are, I have case studies. I need to add the reference to them. So I'll add that when I publish this, case studies. These are things I did back a long time ago, in the 15, 20 years ago. And if you look at the investment and the return, they're astounding. Okay. This 20% productivity gain for 100 people, that's $2 million. That was 2 people coming to a lean course doing value stream management and system thinking. Every one of these, I've seen spectacular gains because if you can't see it, you can't improve it. And I want to be really clear here. I'm not saying I'm a magician. I know other people who do this. I'm always referring to Peter Merrill and Wilfred Mueller and Steve Tendon and, Mike Kottmeyer of Leading Agile and things like that. And we take different approaches. There isn't a way to go forward. There are many ways to go forward. And I actually disagree with some of their ways at times, but that's okay. I mean, I learn from them. We don't all have to agree. As long as it's based in a real science and logical understanding of things, I'm all for that kind of diversity. That's how you learn. It forces you to think and like that. But what I'm saying is what they have in common, what every one of these people I see have in common is somewhere their systems thinking at some level integrated into their work. That's where they come from. They sometimes don't talk about it like I do, probably because they don't have the burr up the butt I have about it not being talked about. But it's there, okay? And this is a common thread, and it's worth knowing. But why systems thinking? Okay, Agile has had a focus on the team since its beginning. You read the Agile Manifesto, teams are mentioned something like 17 times. Business management, clients mentioned just a few times. Our most common team frameworks presume autonomy and self-organization. Back in 2001, that was what was going on in the Agile space. That's not what's happening now. You can't build effectively from the pieces. I'll talk about this a lot when I get into Christopher Alexander's approach. Timeless Way of Building is still my #1 book, or one of the #1 books. It's also the only book that you could read not having any interest in agility or technical. And yet it's one of the most important books for me as an agilist and developer that I've ever read. My wife and I have been called the high tech, high touch. She was a massage therapist. She was a school counselor. She's got 2 degrees in psychology. You can imagine who the high touch person was. But I had her read that book and she loved it. Okay, so it's not about a mechanical, technical thing at all. It's about how to approach problems as a whole. Large frameworks also don't do this well either. SAFe has got lots and lots of components, but they're not put together in a coherent system. They mention systems thinking, but mentioning it and doing it are 2 different things. Okay, so I wanted to throw out at the beginning some problems. In fact, here's an interesting idea. This would actually help me in the future things. So I'm going to mention some problems, but in the chat, I'm just opening it up so I can see it. In the chat, if you see a way there's a way that systems thinking can help a problem of yours, throw it in the chat. Let's see. I want to, when we get into the Amplio system, instead of describing the system, which is present, I have a Lucid Spark board that does this. You actually want to come from, hey, you're having this problem. How do you solve it? Because that's what Amplio is about. So one problem is the overall organization structure. How do you organize companies? I don't know how you would do this without systems thinking. Most of those spectacular results I had actually had to do with changing the workflow and organizational structure and responsibilities. What's management's role? Management's been left out of the agile space. And now we're complaining about how they're not doing a good job. That is, to me, I don't know, that's kind of victimhood, arrogance, whatever. If management is not performing well and we're not educating them in the new space, then I think we're the ones to blame, not them. This is true in general, that you shouldn't expect people to do something if you're not talking to them and educating them. Now, the flip of this is every one of those examples I gave were actually led by managers. Oh my goodness. No team was involved in every four of those cases with those spectacular results, but the managers were working on behalf of the teams and understood what's going on. So this myth that it has to happen from the teams is absolutely patently absurd. And the reason was we weren't excluding the teams, no. But what we were doing is taking a holistic view of anywhere from dozens to hundreds of people, and you couldn't have people so much at the team represented. I mean, they were represented, they were there, but they weren't making the decision because the decision had to take place at a high level. And you had, as it was, sometimes 5, sometimes one group was like 20 people, and you needed that high view. So the point is not so much, there are two factors. Are you coming from the motivations and the benefit of the people involved? Yes, everybody there was, managers, because I'd educated them in that. And did you have the whole picture in view? Okay. Where to look when something goes wrong? People look usually in the wrong place. It's kind of human. Maybe this is a Western thing. If anybody's not like in the Western culture, and this isn't true for your culture, please let me know. But in the West, when something goes wrong, you look to see who's to blame. We learned this as kids. Who dragged mud into the house? Which one of you did that? Who broke the lamp? You know, and you point to the cat, of course. Uh, but we're not used to thinking that's not what's happening, that there's something about the environment we're in that's causing the problems. How to avoid local optimization. Yeah, Bill, you anticipated that. Perfect. Creating a safer environment. This is an interesting thing. See, if we're going around blaming people when it's not the person's fault, then it becomes unsafe because at any moment you can get blamed. What about if you have consistent, inconsistent behavior when you need consistent behavior? You could try to drill it into people, okay? But that's not an easy process, drilling it into people to get consistency. One of my sons was in the Army, and I paid a lot of attention to what he went through in boot camp and all that. Unfortunately, came out. He was in 2 tours of duty, but he's come out safe. And boy, they took weeks to drill into people to get consistent behavior. And it was really gruesome. And it's not something you could ever get to have somebody do in a working environment. I mean, unless you're in the Army, that's a working environment. Trying to get people to be consistent is a really tough row to hoe. Getting a system consistent that makes it easier for people to be consistent is not that hard. I'm not saying it's easy. So solving any consistently occurring problem, if it happens over and over again. Now you have to combine it with other things, value stream management, Christopher Alexander's approach to designing system with, you know, all these synergize, they multiply. That's why I put that slide up. No, really good, Harold. It's a great question. When do you want inconsistent behavior? Well, then you want a system that provokes inconsistent behavior. That's such a great insight. The point is the system evokes behavior. And if you're not getting the behavior you want, then look to the system, not to the people. And then the people and management have to work together. I mean, the people doing the work, managers are people too, by the way. The people doing the work and management work together to improve the system. I love that question. I would say not only is when is it okay, but when is it desired? How do we make it okay that people push back? Someone wrote, I'm trying to remember now who, wrote something like they talked about getting off the shoulders of giants. I thought that was brilliant. Yeah, I related to it because I talk about my standing on the shoulders of giants, and to be candid, I'm not sure I've gotten off of any of their shoulders. Uh, but it's good thinking. You gotta break with things. Yeah, that's right. When do we want disruption? When do we not want disruption? When do we not know? Is really, really good insights. Okay, so you cannot consistently solve problems without awareness and understanding. One of the things that, Deming talks about is you can't manage something if you can't measure it. I'm not sure I always agree with that because sometimes you can tell if you're going in the right direction, but you certainly can't manage it if you can't see it. And this is the forest for the trees issue. And I love this quote from Ellie Goldratt: a comfort zone has less to do with control and more to do with knowledge. We complain about managers, but we don't explain their role. We don't say what's going on. Now, if you're a manager, then that's something you need to know and learn. And then you could do the same for people, because very often people don't know their role. How many developers have you heard say, well, my job is coding. I like to design. I like to do this. And it's like, well, I don't know. In this job, what you need to do is be adding value to the customer. And I'm glad if you can find value for yourself and adding value to the customer, but this is not a hobby. And so we all have to look at that. And the first stage of knowledge is awareness. Now, I love this picture uh, from Sketchplanations, and I have permissions to reuse it here. And it's the story about looking under the lamppost. There's actually a joke behind this where this guy has lost his key. This cop sees this guy looking under a lamppost for his keys, and he asks him what's going on. I said, I lost my keys here. And the policeman asks him, well, you sure you left them here? Because we can't find it. He says, no, I didn't drop them here. I dropped them down in that alley. Well, why are we looking here? Light's better. And this is kind of what we do. And the interesting observation from Edgar Schein is we do not think and talk about what we see what we're able to think and talk about. This is human physiology. Our brain filters and transforms things. And then I added this. This means if it's not in our vernacular, it's not in our sight. If we don't have words for it, then we can't see it. Now, there's an interesting philosophical debate whether we literally, physically manifest the reality around us, and I don't need to go there, but I do know our perceptions of the reality are based on what hit our consciousness, and if we don't have words for it, we don't have that. This is a very important insight, and it's why when we're focused on the team, then we're not going to see a lot of things, and that's really a problem. We can't manage it, just all this chaos. And we justify it by saying, oh, the world is complex. Oh, woe is us. And that's just being a victim. And I totally disagree with this. And I'm not alone in this case. I guess I've got the right giants to be standing on the shoulders of. I've had a lot of conversations with the people I consider to be the top thought leaders in the world, and in this area, like Don Reinertsen, Tom Gill. And I've read a lot of Ellie Goldratt, and this idea that can we in fact understand what's going on? Yes. Do we see everything? No, but there are ways to unobscure that. Okay, so that's the preface. Now I'm going to get into what systems thinking is and then how you use it. Okay. So Russ Aikoff is my favorite. Here's another reference I'll add into this. Russ Aikoff did a 10-minute, 12-minute talk, and you can find it by saying, what if Russ Aikoff did a TED talk? This predates TED, so it wasn't the TED talk, but it was 12 minutes, and it's really the most brilliant talk on systems thinking. You'll get the essence of systems thinking. If you have questions on systems thinking, also please post them in the LinkedIn group that you've been referred to in the Amplio community of practice. Andrew here is watching, so I'm going to mention him. He's actually an expert on systems thinking and Aikoff way more than I am. I mean, I just give that call out, Andrew. He's had a very positive impact on me with this, and I just barely scratched the surface, in my opinion, compared to what he knows. So those are user groups. You can ask people questions, and call him out. I'm sure he'll be happy to. If not, I'll get on his case and make him say something. We're buddies, so I can say things like that. Anyway, successful problem solving requires finding the right solution to the right problem. We fail more often because we solve the wrong problem than because we get the wrong solution to the right problem. See, when you solve the wrong problem, you just try again. You try harder. This is why we have so many failed Agile implementations where they try it, then they try it again. Oh, well, maybe that doesn't work. Let's try this Agile approach. But in all cases, they're missing the same thing. When you get the wrong solution to the right problem and you try it again, you've got to hope for success. Okay. Our ability to solve a problem is limited by our conception of what's feasible. This is, again, if we don't understand systems and we can't see what's going on, we fall back into our comfort zone. In Ellie Goldratt and Efrat, his daughter's Efrat's Goldratt book called The Choice, they talk about this, that if you don't think you can see a problem, you'll give up and you won't go out of your box. So that's important. And you rarely improve organizations as a whole by improving the performance of one or more of its parts. I'm not saying don't improve, but you have to look at the whole as you do it. Okay. So systems are defined by the relationships between the components, not the components themselves. And if you took the best parts, this is the example Russ talks about. Take the best parts of the best cars, put them together, you have a pile of junk. Yet this is how most organizations are trying to improve. Let's get that team working, then we'll get that team working, then they'll get that team. Dean Leffingwell said, you can't have an Agile organization unless you have Agile teams. And a lot of that was inferring you start with the Agile teams. And I'm saying, no. When I did SAFE, I found it easier and more effective to focus on management, product management, the context of the whole. And then I still remember this. I did, not intentionally, but I did the worst team level training of my career after that. And it worked brilliantly. And I wasn't worried about it. The reason I did the worst team level training of my career was they had a limited budget and I had to train 2 to 3 times the most I'd ever trained before with lousy materials. Back in 2012, SAFE's Scrum materials were really atrocious. They fixed them. They're actually pretty good now. I know there's a lot of grief they get about SAFE Scrum, that in some ways it's better. In some ways it's not better than regular Scrum. But I knew that if I talked to the teams about how they would fit into the whole system, I didn't have to explain why you did 2-week increments because they understood it. Oh, this is a time to see how I'm working with the other teams. That makes sense. Oh, I have to get something to demonstrate to the customer in conjunction with everybody so the customer can give us feedback. That makes sense. So this resistance to why am I building things in small places just dissolved, never showed up, didn't dissolve, just never was there. They understood it looking at the whole. Okay. Carness exists in the system as a whole. Carness is not the parts. Yeah, we work on the parts. By the way, I'm not endorsing SAFE. I used to be an SPCT. I was the first trainer outside of SAI there. I was a gold partner. I did a contributor. I did a lot of things. But at some point, to keep my certification, they said I had to do 2 SAFE implementations by the book. And I never had done one up to that point. I'd had success not doing it by the book. I wasn't going to damage my clients to keep my certification. And I dropped out a long time ago. But they at least, they don't do systems thinking, but they take a decent overview of some things. Okay. This is one of the key insights you get from systems thinking, common and special cause. This comes from Deming, that studied errors classified them as a common cause error. This means that this is kind of due to the system. Everybody has this problem. It's not you had a bad day today. Special cause could be a person going off the deep end. Could be a machine broke that usually never does, and there's nothing much we can do about it. Could be an earthquake happened. Could be any number of things. Okay. Common cause are those due to the system. Special causes, usually individuals, but not always. Deming said 94% of errors are common cause. Now, he was in manufacturing, and I'm not convinced that it's the same percentage in knowledge work as it is in manufacturing, but I think it's safe to say it's at least 90%. Okay. I have seen this. If you have teams distributed across the world, that causes lots of issues, and that would be an example. My tester's not available to me because they're in India and I'm in the United States, West, time zone. That's a problem. It's not my fault. I might overcome it. Look to the system before blaming people. This is a key lesson. I like to say if everybody has the problem is not with everybody. That's another way to look at it. This is recurring. Probably a recurring problem is probably a common cause error. It's one of the things to demonstrate how systems thinking is not very prevalent in the Agile space. Just look at LinkedIn and see how much people of an approach Blame. Oh my goodness, they're misunderstanding. Oh my goodness, why did they do this? Oh my goodness, why does this happen? There's just a post this morning I saw about that. Oh, Kanban now is getting like Scrum, it's getting popular, so people are misinterpreting it and all that. And I'm like, if everybody's misinterpreting it, maybe the way you're explaining it, maybe the way it's structured, maybe the way it's responded has something to do with it. But people don't self-reflect. It's like we want to reflect on our work, but not on ourselves, and certainly not on our approach. Not when we have certification. Sorry, that was a little snide remark, but it's there because we've put it into now our way of doing our career. It's like Upton Sinclair says, it's difficult to convince a man of something when their salary depends upon them not understanding it. I said, rather, it's difficult to get a man to understand something when their salary depends on their not understanding it. Okay. Deming provides some other things. He talks about you have to manage systems. They don't manage themselves. The local pieces, this is what drives local optimization. They become selfish, independent profit centers. They destroy the system. They get their silos better. Everybody's improving their silos is another way to say it. Improving your silos doesn't make for a better system. Management's role is to improve the system, okay? Basically, it's to shift from managing teams to managing the system within which teams work. By the way, this idea was probably presented way before this, but I find it very ironic. Scrum, and therefore much of Agile, was influenced by an article called The New Product Development Game by Takeuchi and Nonaka in '86. 2 years later, Nonaka wrote an article in the same magazine, Harvard Business Review, called Towards Middle Up-Down Management, which talks about this. It's ironic to me that the same guy wrote two articles, and one was used as, maybe you could even say, a lot of the basis of Agile, and the other one isn't even mentioned. Why? Because it talks about management, and management's bad and evil and bad, and they're just always in our way. Except that's not true, of course. Okay, knowing the system is at fault avoids managers blaming teams and then teams blaming the managers back in this endless cycle. Systems thinking will foster trust, respect, and a safe environment because we're looking at the whole and we're not blaming individuals. Okay, so here's what I want to do. I looked at, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 aspects of systems thinking that you can use. So I'm not saying these are aspects of systems thinking. These are what you can use systems thinking for. And I think this is the best way to describe system thinking. I've already said what it is. It's about the relationships. It causes the behavior. So how do we look at the whole? It's an essential tool to help guide decisions and problems. And we can use each of the characteristics of it to make better decisions. This is not an abstract thought, oh, this is cool stuff, even though it is cool stuff. It's useful, cool stuff. Okay. So let's look at the whole. We've got to look at the whole. Value is measured not when it is delivered. I mean, value is delivered when it's delivered, not by when it's completed. In other words, if you don't go through the whole build cycle and you just have it built, but it's not out there, it's not delivered, it's not getting value consumed. In fact, this is actually kind of right. It's not when it's delivered, it's when it's consumed. It might just be shelfware, or I don't know what you would call it. Now, that's what we used to call it in the 90s and 2000, when you buy something, put it on your shelf and never use it. So it's internet where it's out there, but nobody knows it's out there. So it's when it's consumed, actually, not when it's delivered. Local optimizations don't increase maximum value typically, unless that's the blocking point. That's what the theory of constraints is about. Avoid that. Okay. Look for interactions. You know, the thing on the right, I've got the characteristic of it. So how do the different responsibilities interact with each other? How does test interact with design and coding? How does business architecture interact with product management? These are all intertwined with each other. How do you see all this stuff? It's difficult when you just look at them as individual components. It's why value stream management is so important, because value stream management provides you a way of seeing what's going on. On that earlier graph, you may or may not have noticed it, but I had value stream management so you can see what's happening. Okay. How do people respond? How do they interact with the system? This is, again, one of these great ironies. Agile is supposed to be about people. Yet, any number I'm just trying to think, is that a euphemism for virtually everyone? I think it is, not all of them. But most of our agile methods out there ignore how people are going to react to the statements you make about them. Like, what does purposely incomplete do for people? How do they react it? Or follow until you understand? Or it's immutable. What is the psychological impact of those statements on the people adopting things? It's pretty severe. If we believe in humans as being important, we have to attend to that. And that's part of the whole system thing. It's not the systems over there and people are over here. People are part of the system. You can't separate them. And you have to look at the relationships between the mechanical aspects of the system and the human aspects of the system. It's not all sense and logic. How people, it's got to be considered. And you don't ever see this. You just see complaints about this. Oh, yeah, they misunderstood. Why did they misunderstood? Knowing how people are, why would you expect them not to misunderstand? And there's no answer to that. If you say, oh, people misunderstand this, then you're bashing. No, I'm not. I'm trying to point out something you need to improve. Fixing one part of the system is not going to necessarily help. In fact, usually it blinds you. We got to fix the pieces. How fast you get anything done at any one place is irrelevant unless it speeds up the consumption of value. This also causes problems. One of the things in 20 years ago, we used to do, people would talk about pilots. So they'd start like a Scrum pilot project. They'd take their best people and put them together and they'd work on one thing. I tell you what, you get your best people, put them together and work on one thing. I don't care what they do. They're going to be a 3 times improvement, maybe 10 times because you got your best people. So, wow, look how great that was. And then they try it again and they try it again. And after a while, it stops working. And the reason is they've not addressed how the whole system works together. They've just addressed how a team works together. This is the team centricity part. Now, I'm not saying don't do pilots. I do pilots all the time. I typically take a value stream and I make sure the people I put on the pilot aren't essential to the people not on the pilot, because otherwise you're damaging your project actually damages the rest of the organization if you put your best people on it, because those people are no longer available to the organization. You have to pay attention to this. So why does Agile stagnate? And then we talk about management's messing us up. And I'm saying, no, be a little more self-aware, okay? I just threw this one in. I have so many people, oh, I like to code. My job is coding. And the answer is no, your job is to create value for the customers. And it's not demeaning, only if you make it demeaning. You know, one of the interesting things about being the CEO and owner of a small company is you're the one who gets to clean the waste baskets when nobody else does. And I never found that demeaning. I was creating an environment for my people to work well in. It didn't bother me. They have better things to do than clean the waste baskets. If I don't want to clean the waste baskets, hire a janitorial service. I was never a victim to that. I didn't mind walking through the place at times. Okay, we did actually have a janitorial service, but they didn't always work well. Teams need to know it's not how fast they can finish software. It's when it gets into the hands of the customer. And if they don't like it, then don't work here. And sometimes you got to be harsh. I mean, oh, I'm going to do remote manufacturing work, but we don't have any tools to facilitate that. No, nobody gets a job. Nobody gets a job on the assembly line working from home. I mean, it's like, I'm not saying we can't have, I'm just using that as an example. I'm not making an argument for remote work or on-site work. I think there's a lot of, you have to blend it for what's right. System causes most of the problems. Consider the way people are organized. I can't get people testing. Maybe testers and developers ought to be done by the same people, or they should pair, or whatever. But how are you affected by it? What about product owners not being available? This affects developers. Yeah, we don't misunderstand the product owners. They're not here to stand to understand them. Okay. When something goes wrong, we need to fix the system. When you do this, you start seeing accidents out in the world from a completely different light. Many things are accidents waiting to happen because nobody is looking at the system. Most errors are common cause, meaning the system is causing them. Corin, that's a good question. Developers need to know. Performance metrics are a whole other issue because typically metrics are going to be measuring the results of the system on the people, which makes it absolutely insane. Since you mentioned that, I'm going to talk a little bit about this because this was actually, it kind of points to one of Deming's 14 points that, man, it took me months to really understand. This was back in the late 80s when I was studying Deming in the late 80s and studying Toyota. They hadn't named it lean yet, but I had a business coach who, I mean, this guy was brilliant. And I took 2 one-year seminars with him, or learning journeys, as I call them now. And he had to study this. And one of the things in reading about Deming, and he talked about it as well, there was this book we were studying, and one of the 14 points that he talked about is not to implore people to do better. And I was like, are you crazy? Of course you should implore people to do better. I'd actually started out with IBM, and there was the think was our big mantra. And I was in this, at this time, I was also in this whole thing about people can overcome where they are. That lasted until I read No Contest by Alfie Kohn, which is a brilliant book out of print. But he talks about how people are in, it's hard to get out of someone's culture because that's what you grew up in, okay? And I come from a culture of where my parents and my grandparents and before them, we're all entrepreneurs. So to me, it's like, well, you're having troubles, just become an entrepreneur. But if you don't grow up in that culture, that's not present for you. If you grow up in a culture where people don't get ahead and they can't get ahead, then you have that mindset a lot of times. So imploring people to do better is not useful, and it's actually negative. Because if it's a system holding you back, you're kind of putting the blame on them when it's really the system. You've taken your eyes off the ball, so to speak. You want to work on the system. You want to say, you are good, I trust you, you're worthy, and we together have to fix the system. And that's very important. So when you do review, sometimes you're reviewing individuals when most of their behavior is the system they're in. This is why team reviews can be useful, because that's the system. Looking at how people are working as a team, but evaluating even teams within a bad system can be unfair. So he said, ignore these, trying to get people to do better through motivations, like no accidents today or things like that. Do things that create awareness. That's good, but don't lay blame on people. Hopefully that addressed it, Corin. If it didn't, throw another thing up there. Okay, trying to lay blame, it demoralizes, it induces fear. When people know that management understands the system is causing most of the problem, it's easier to be transparent. Scrum talks about being transparent, but you're not going to be transparent if you're going to get blamed. And you see people see that. So now you need courage. It's one of the foundations of Scrum. One of the values is courage. Well, the problem with courage is I don't know how to make somebody more courageous. So if you don't have it, what are you going to do? I had this interesting insight yesterday. I wrote a post about it. I sometimes work out on my porch, and it's really great view of the Puget Sound, and I got these huge trees there, and I look up and there's this squirrel about 50 feet up in the air on one of these really huge pine trees, and he's scrambling down, and I'm saying to myself, boy, that guy's brave. I mean, 50 feet for a squirrel is like 300 feet for me, and I'm afraid of heights. So, and then I realized, no, he's not brave. He doesn't have any courage. He's confident. He knows how to hold on to a tree. I've never seen a tree. I've seen squirrels do some funny things on trees, but I've never seen them just fall off. They don't just fall off. They're confident, and just as important, they trust themselves to use what they know. So we have to make a distinction between courage and confidence and recognize that, are we confident that we can understand and see what's going on? And are we confident we'll work with our people? If we're managers, we'll work with our teams. If we're teams, we'll work with our managers. This can make it transparent. Insisting, see, this is one of the things that really gets me. insisting that people have the right quality so they can use your process, and then blaming them if they don't have it is damaging and is a bad thing. You need to either not insist on people having certain qualities, which I personally think is difficult. Oh, they need more motivation to do this. No, make it so it's not so hard to motivate. I'm sorry, I'm going to do one little sideways. I know I'm segueing here a little bit. So I'm diabetic, and I read this book called, and I've never been able to keep to diets. And yeah, I take my meds. And I read this book called The Glucose Revolution, where she explains diabetes, but more important, she explains how to get a better effect on diabetes without actually changing what you eat. You change the order of what you eat. And that sounds weird, but it's true. If you eat high fiber food first, it slows the whole digestive process down. So the sugar stuff comes in at a slower rate and your glucose doesn't spike. And I have made a significant improvement. I've gone from being kind of pretty well diabetic down to pre-diabetic diabetic. I'm right on that border now. And I've done it in the last 7 months. And I've not suffered. And I've not suffered. And I'm a guy who doesn't have motivation to keep a diet, but I've done this now for 7 months. Why? One is I understand what's going on at a level I never understood. And two, she made it easier for me to do it. I need less motivation, more motivation from understanding. That's what systems are about. And complaining about when people don't do it, to me, is absurd. Okay. You get safety this way. Okay. If you want consistency of behavior, have the system create it. These are why checklists are good. We end up calling them coaching guides. I'm going to show you one in a minute. But templates are useful. This is why airplanes, you're at the airport, the plane is, the pilot's going to go through a checklist. Now, pilots, flying planes is not as obviously just straightforward as it might look. There are lots of factors that can be involved. And when something is complicated, the brain kind of gets overwhelmed. Where templates come from, where checklists come from, is actually pre-World War II. There was a competition for creating the bomber for the United States Air Force. And the B-17, the Flying Fortress, that was B-17, right? So the B-17 was clearly the best plane. I mean, it was amazing. It had more range, more gun power, you name it, it was better. The only problem, it was kind of complicated. And on the main test flight, competitive test flight, it crashed and killed the crew. Not a good thing. Now, fortunately, somebody in the Air Force knew this was a brilliant plane, and maybe they can fix the sucker. So they kept a little funding open. And what Boeing did is they looked at why it happened. And they didn't look at it like, well, the pilot was bad. No, this was their best pilot. This was their best everything on that plane. This was like a major future thing. And what they had done is they had locked one of the control surfaces so it couldn't control the plane's altitude, and that's why it crashed. So they realized they needed a checklist. Do this, do this, do this, do this. Now, some people believe checklists are demeaning. Some people believe, oh, it's complicated and complex, so we can't have a checklist. I believe just the opposite. I believe because it's complicated and because it's complex, you need to make sure you look at these things because it's really harrowing in the environment. Now, you don't follow the checklist by taking out your common sense, but it's a reminder of things. This is one of the things we teach in the ACE program. So for years, when I was at Net Objectives, I used to go into a client and I'd have an interactive conversation and we'd talk about things. And I hate to say this, but one thing went on for years before I changed it. And one of those things was I'm a kind of smart guy, got a lot of experience. So I kind of relied on my own wherewithal, you could say. And usually it never happened that somebody didn't say, but Al, what about this? Now I'm a quick recovery when I make a mistake. And I would say, yeah, I was just about to get there. When to myself, I was saying, Al, how the F could you have forgotten to mention that? But I'm good, so I could do that. And it occurred to me, I needed a checklist. Make sure you talk about this. Make sure you talk about this. Make sure you talk about this. I wasn't reading from the checklist. I was using it to remind me because in harrowing situations, that's what's useful. Integrated into my system. This is actually what we do in the ACE program. As part of it is a model to help us decide how to do things that we can use to guide us. Some of the things we expose and some of the things we don't, because some of the things we may not want the customer to see we're thinking. An example of that is I trust my customers, but I don't trust that what they tell me is always true. They're telling me what they think is true. So I have some reminders that, maybe this isn't true. Maybe this is what's going on. But you don't want to put that out in front of them like you're not trusting. People misrepresent themselves unintentionally a lot. Okay. It's more effective than expecting individuals to do it. You can use this to break up silos. Okay. Because now we can see how the pieces work together. Oh, yeah. Waterfall is exactly the opposite of systems thinking. Let's get all the design done. Then let's get all this done. And let's get all this done. And we're not looking at the relationships between things. Okay. It can create an awareness that silos are ineffective. And by the way, I talk about this in the value stream videos that I'll show you as I build this thing out. They're already out there. They're already on if you go to Success Engineering and go to resources and go to the YouTube playlists on the website, you'll see one of them is value streams. There's hours of stuff out there. Okay. By focusing on the systems instead of individuals, we can reduce fear. Oh, I'm going to get blamed for this, even though I know it's not my fault. You ever have that? You ever in a situation where you know it wasn't your doing, but you know you're going to get blamed? See, this is what causes fear. Because then it's like I can get blamed for anything. This is a really insidious and bad thing. You go in the day every day and you're worried, what am I going to get blamed for today? And it's not even conscious. It's just this fear that's there. I did want to talk about a few things that you could use to make Scrum better, because it's team focused, which is the local optimization. It's a simple framework designed for small cross-functional autonomous teams creating a new product. That's what it was designed for. It's still designed for that, but the world has changed. It's easy to start. Got all this short planning, daily pivots. I mention this because when you have a team that meets this requirement of being autonomous, I literally kicked Scrum teams off when they knew how to build small code in an hour. And then they give me a report 10 months later and they say, that worked great. It's not hard. What's hard is making it work where it's not designed. But then, of course, it's immutable and they don't tell you how. We've moved beyond the team. We've got to do something with it. So take the essence of Scrum, which is Agile, but you got to add this other stuff to it. And if it says don't do something, then what you've got to do is then do what works, not so much what a guide tells you to do. You need to learn how do Scrum teams work with other things, okay? I just threw this in because there was some conversation this morning about Kanban now being a victim of its own success like Scrum has been. But this is true. But the challenge with multi-team Agile is between the teams, not within the teams. So it's been created to be complete. It gives us a simple start, but it doesn't give us guidance for where now it wasn't designed for. Coordination isn't enough. Systems thinking will have us say, how do we get alignment? Okay. Basically, taking a bottom-up approach to solve things is like we're in the world of the myth of Sisyphus. We're asked to keep rolling that boulder up and then it falls down. By the way, this is where the other sessions I'm going to do. You know me, anybody who's heard me do these talks know me. Normally, I would have done all 5 of those things in one session, and you just said, Al, too much. So I'm trying to learn. That's why I'm going to do this over 5 or 6 hours and focus on one aspect of it, but tie things together, okay? Systems thinking is an essential part of the way out. How to see the system with value stream management is another aspect like I had at that first thing. Okay. So here's something that we do in the ACE program. I've just started doing it, so I don't have it everywhere. I call it a coaching guide. That's my politically correct template. It sounds better than a checklist or a template. It's a coaching guide. You ask if you've got repeated problems, look to your systems. Okay. When something goes wrong, before trying anything, is it a common cause? Is it not a common cause? See, this is a mental checklist to use systems thinking on. When you're going to change something, attend to how it'll affect the people on your team or other teams. How do you systems thinking to break up silos? Use value stream management to look across. And when something needs to be done consistently, integrate the process of doing it into the system. Yeah, I was pretty sure that was the last one. So basically, that's it. I'll put this up here to remind you. We're going to do talks. This one, I'm not going to do another live session because I've got the recordings for this. This one I've been promising to do for the ACEs, and I think I'm going to do it for y'all because I can get it done. I have done things on first principles and inherent simplicity. By the way, I use inherent simplicity, but you've heard me talk about it as factors for effective value streams. So I will pull together videos of all this. I even have some Alexander stuff, but I've never put together his work in one place. I read his work in the mid 90s, I think it was, or early 90s. Yeah, it was before I went out to Louisiana for a couple of years. And this completely changed my view on how you design systems when I read his book, Timeless Way of Building. And integrated into it is systems thinking, looking at the whole, designing from the whole, how you decompose it, keeping relationships present. So systems thinking, all of these work together, and I'll be talking about them. Okay, so I'm through with the presentation. I will get these up. I'll get this side up and the PDFs of this. Any questions? Or I'll go look through the chat because I didn't get all of the chat, but I'm going to go through that.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Two questions. I'll start with this first one. Because Curtis Gilbert raised the issue about what we really need to fix the healthcare apparatus is how individual people are trained. The history of our current healthcare system is related to the Rockefellers, and in like 1912 or 10 or somewhere around then, Flexner, they made a report on how to improve things, and they ended up basically putting in their own people into all the medical schools, and they have really controlled it. So this was a solution to the very, very confused different approaches that were made and consolidated in a single method. But unfortunately, it's got all of the systems possibilities and it leaves out any disruptive improvements, and it's very self-protective. So one of the things that I know that Agile practitioners encountered was this self-protection in our current organizational management systems. And how do you deal with that?
Yeah, this is a problem probably too big for just Agile to deal with, but let me talk about it two different ways. I'm going to talk about one just from a general philosophy, excuse me, and then I'm going to talk about what you're saying. Western medicine mostly does not recognize that the human body is a system. It's based on, we've got all these components. Eastern medicine does. I do a lot of Eastern medicine stuff, you know. Now, if I need surgery, I will see a doctor who's going to go in and fix it. Acute things. So I'm not one of these people, oh, I can deal with a system and take a system thinking approach and cure myself. I've had friends die doing that. Steve Jobs, actually, I think, died doing that. But there is a system, treat the body as a whole. It's not its pieces. But that's not even the problem here. There's another problem here. We don't have a healthcare industry. We have an unhealth treatment industry. Most insurance companies barely pay for preventing problems. Like I went through a lot of grief. I'm just, you can't see it, but I've got a glucose monitor on me. So I can see what my glucose is every time I want to. Now, admittedly, I sometimes obsess over that. But I tell you, getting my A1C, for those of you who know it, from 7.9 down to 6.5 is a major accomplishment. And I'm going to probably live longer because of it. And now the insurance company doesn't have to pay out faster because of me. And this costs like not that expensive a device. But most companies won't give it to you. I found one that would. So we don't have a healthcare system. We're not about health. We're about actually treating unhealthy things. And we give a little bit. So that's really the serious problem right there, is that doctors aren't focused on this. And like you say, there's a lot of resistance to it. Now, we see this in the Agile space. In my opinion, the Agile space is certainly not one to teach people to not be dogmatic, because it's more dogmatic than Waterfall was. I've been in software development since 1970, and it's getting worse. It's not getting better. Gotta qualify that. Agile has done a lot to make things better, but the dogmatism is worse. That's what I meant. The dogmatism is way worse now. Nobody defended waterfall before. They would talk about it, like the advantage of it, the disadvantage of it. You can talk to them. Now, back then, I didn't really know how to talk to them. And I was not looking at systems thinking early on. But after a while, and I started doing it, I started realizing that if I could make a compelling discussion, nobody was saying you're bashing. Nobody would defend it because nobody was making their living on promoting waterfall. People make their living now on promoting particular things. Okay. Andrew, what's that, the YouTube you got? Is that one of Akoff in healthcare?
Yeah, that's he did an interview with Haynes Media. He's talking about knowledge and wisdom and data and
I think I know
information.
which one that is. Yeah, if that's one I'm
Yeah.
thinking is brilliant. I'm sure it's good.
This is the one where he talks about his views on healthcare that
Perfect.
so
Yeah, it's about an hour, right? Well,
I
whatever.
think so.
Yeah, yeah. So watch that because that'll give you some really good insights. Okay, any other questions?
Well, this is the same question that from my original one, but it's related to this topic because we're dealing we all have a common problem, the people who are coming to learn from you, Al, which is we also want to make a living. And how do we apply systems thinking to this structure of teaching that is systemically flawed and has a common cause problem?
Well, there are two things I'm doing here. And I was kind of actually a little surprised. I got chastised a little bit from about this. But so first of all, I think our training methods are broken seriously. Now there is value in having a group of people coming together for a couple of days if you're about to do an initiative, like let's learn SAFe, let's learn Scrum, let's learn Scrum at scale, whatever it is. Because there's a lot of teamwork and agreements that should be made in a training. In other words, this is one of the things. It shouldn't be agree to follow. It should be agree on how we're working. One of the problems I have with frameworks is we're taking this so we can agree to do the framework when it should be we're going to use the framework to give us ideas on how to work together. So if it's a 2-day course that's about we're going to work together and this is our starting point, then that's useful because you get to try it and use it and all that, and you don't forget it. But if you as an individual go to one of these workshops, 80% is gone within 2-3 days. There are all sorts of studies. And yeah, they may have you learn a game or something like that. But if it's a certification course, you don't care about the game, you care about the certification test, that's information, you're going to lose almost all of it. So the effectiveness of training is about 20% at best when it's about just individual learning. That's why I've created these learning journeys. The ACE learning journey is we have 6 1-hour sessions every week for 3 weeks, and we take a break for a week and then 3 weeks again, more or less. And we do this, the sessions are different. This is one of the 6, by the way. I have this one open to the public. And then there are 3 learning sessions where I present content. And then what I call 2 working sessions where I'm happy to do questions and answers, but mostly the group works with me, helps me. See, I'm working with everybody in the community to figure out what to do. Like yesterday morning, we had a deep discussion about how to do training, presenting it from a problem point of view, as opposed to how you use Amplo. It's very useful to me, very useful to the people there. So this is the other point. You want it spread out over time so people can try things. And so you can get questions answered, so you ask questions and somebody tries something and you answer the question and they try something again. Now it's not used a lot like that because the materials kind of, as we talk about it, I think that, it just comes out into the next session. But that's part of how training needs to be, is how does it act as almost a mentoring program? But the other piece is what I was trying to talk about here. Most people who are working feel their job is pressing and they're in urgent situations all the time and they don't have time to learn. Just look at the resistance on retros. Retros make so much sense, but I don't have time for it. Well, we need to have our education system be is you've got a problem. How do you address the problem? Like this Glucose Revolution book. I had a problem in that I had diabetes, and I had a problem is that I like to eat certain foods. That was my problem. And she addressed those problems with what she calls hacks, how I can get around those things. So I was really interested in that because she was solving a problem. Most training isn't solving problems. Most training is how to learn the thing I'm selling, and I'll give you certification for it. It's totally wrong. And yet we've accepted this. We've normalized this. And when you speak out against it, it can cause grief. Now, here's the thing, as consultants, and this is why I have the ACE learning journey. I'm not saying everybody needs to do this stuff, but if you want to have an impact in the world, then you better be paying attention to it as a coach. Know this is there and then learn how to move forward. And that's what I'm doing in the ACE program. I should say we're doing in the ACE program. There's some ACEs here. And I personally think it's the way to go forward and to make a change. Okay, let me just see if there's some new messages. We're over time. That's okay. Yeah. Very good. Great questions. I'm going to take a couple of minutes to answer Sherilyn's question here. What can we do when we can't change the process directly? Trying to point out where there isn't system thinking isn't going to work because they're not using system thinking because they don't understand it. It's a good question. What you have to do is if you understand system thinking and you could see the cost of not having system thinking, then point out the cost. In other words, if things repeatedly happen, and I'll give you a quick example of this. We have some slides. It's what I call a micro lesson on the costs of interruptions. Managers are not evil, but they will tend to interrupt at times that causes damage. And the reason is they're not aware of what they're doing. Now, you can argue with them and all that. I don't find that's very useful. But if you start showing them the cost of what they're doing, then they'll start appreciating the cost of what they're doing. So make evidence available to people so they can see the impact of their lack of systems thinking. And then, yes, then maybe throw in what you were saying. By the way, if we see this here, a way to get around that is if we did systems thinking, we could ameliorate that problem. See, so then you lead with the damage and then you give systems thinking as a solution, starting with the problem. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Well, I've enjoyed this and I appreciate you letting me talk so much. I'm not going to have all the other sessions be this much lecture, but this one was, I felt this is a pretty involved topic. That's why I sliced each of these others into separate things because each one deserves its own hour, but we'll have more examples. We can talk about more examples. Okay, so I'm going to close this. Again, thanks for being here. Same time next week we do this, and I'll be in touch.
Thanks, Al.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.